Hello and welcome back to this series. So in this tutorial, this is what we're going to build. What you can see on the screen, we've got this center or this left-hand side column, which is scrollable. And then this is just the main page scroll, the normal page scroll. And then we've got this right column, which will scroll independently. Okay, so that's what we're going to build in this tutorial. So the first task is I'm just going to go to the index page and just copy this nav bar. There we go. So that just gives us the nav bar up the top. So that's the first step, just to copy and paste of the previous nav bar we've created. So we start off building the basic structure for this layout. And you can see that we've got the container. So this time I'm going to use a full screen, full width container. So I'm using container fluid. And I've set up a row and I've got two divs, one for the left and one for the right column. So at this point I just need to span this out. So the left hand side is going to be the larger column. So column 9. And then the right hand side is going to be slightly smaller. And this needs to add up to 12 of course. So 3. So we see that, and now you can see that it's starting to come to shape. Okay, so I noticed that my body and the head tag was missing, so I've just included that back in. So we're going to be utilizing some custom CSS here for the videos, the YouTube videos, to get them to be responsive on the page. So this is just a little bit of responsive or a little bit of CSS that's going to make our YouTube video be responsive on the page and scale as the page moves down and up again. So once we've got that in place, we can now go back into our sections and just add some content first. So we're going to add some content first, and then we're going to configure the scrollable elements. So we're going to be utilizing a Bootstrap card for this. So we can just go over to the documentation, go to card and components, and just grab this basic piece of code here. And we'll put it inside of, this is the right hand column. So I just press Shift and Tab to sort this indentation. Okay, so we're not going to be using an image, so we can remove the image from the card, and we don't need to set the style here, the width, so we can remove that also. So the rest just stays the same. So I set up a simple div with a class of vid. So this isn't connected to Bootstrap at all. This is connected, if you remember, to the style that we just created, so .vid. So that's going to control our iframe for the video. And all I'm going to do is go to YouTube and find a video, select share, and then select embed. And that's going to give me some iframe code. So I've already gone ahead and done that. So here's my code. Let's just bring that back. So this is just being copied and pasted from YouTube, and then I've removed the width and the height from the code because everything, as I previously mentioned, is all being controlled here. So the iframe here has been controlled, the width and the height, and the positioning. So with that in place, that card, let's just check to make sure that that works on the page. There we go, that's the card. Now this is going to need a little bit of padding of some sort, or margin. So I'm going to set the margin Y, so the top and the bottom, to 3. So once I've done that, I can then just copy this again, right there. So I'll copy this out maybe a few times, 2 or 3, probably need 4. So I've copied that out 4 times, and then I go back here, and now you can see that I've got a few options there. So now I'm going to pretty much do exactly the same thing for this center area. So if I take a card, I copy this, and I'm going to put this in the in this element up here. So get rid of left. Just going to use that. Just tidy that up. So I've just copied and pasted the card inside of the left-hand side section as well, column, and then we'll see what that looks like. So that should be full screen. So there we go. So it's starting to take shape. So at this point, I need to start thinking about trying to make this independently scroll from the rest of the page. So when I scroll up and down, I don't want this to also scroll. I want to scroll this independently, this sidebar. So I'm going to just show you the CSS method. It probably isn't as effective as utilizing JavaScript, but we're just going to start simple. And so we need to think about a few parameters here when we're setting this up. So let's head into the CSS and see if we can get this to display properly. So the first thing I need to tackle is the height of this section. So in CSS we can use the view height, which is basically from here to the bottom here. So that can be measured. So I can say I want to get this to the right height first, which is going to be the view height. So if I go back into my style, so I'm going to use height, and then I'm going to make a calculation. So I'm going to be using the view height minus 56 pixels. So that's the height of this section here. So it fits nicely in the screen with the scroll bar. So why minus 56? So basically I'm saying to make it, measure it from there to there, minus 56. So the minus 56 is this, the size of this nav bar. So if I go back into select the nav bar, I can see that altogether this nav bar is 56. It just says here 412 times 56. So that's the height of this nav bar in total. So what I need to do to get this right column to fit from here to there, I need to work out the height of the view height minus 56. So that's where this calculation is coming from. So that should set the height nicely for the right hand column. So that's the first stage. So next I need to configure the overflow. So what I'm basically saying here with overflow, if you've not used this before, Y, so we're talking about Y, X, and Y. So what I'm saying here is that at the moment, this kind of overflows. This column overflows the page, the viewable page. It overflows down here. So we're going to basically turn the overflow off and ask it to scroll instead. So it's not going to go all the way down to the bottom. It's going to scroll from this point here at the bottom. So if I refresh the page, I need a semicolon there. So if I refresh the page, you can now see we've got this bar here, and you can see the bottom of it's here and the top's here. So that's referring to the fact that this column is now being sized correctly. So the view height minus the 56 here. So top to bottom, there we go. So you can see that there is some scrolling in the page, and this still scrolls. Notice that when I scroll the whole page, there's this gap here, because originally what's happened is that the CSS is measured from the top to the bottom here, minus the 56. So that's the height of that. And when I scroll down, you can see the height finishes here. So we kind of need to deal with that next. So to overcome that problem, basically we just make this block, this element, into position sticky and then top 56. So what we're saying here with this piece of code is the fact that when we start scrolling, this is always going to be 56 from the top. So you notice now that when we scroll, this doesn't move at all. So it's sticky, but we positioned it from the top 56 pixels, so it fits nicely with this nav bar. So you can see now when I scroll, it doesn't move, but yet I can still scroll it. So what we need to do now is make the nav bar sticky too. So let's go to the nav bar at the top, and we basically just need to change that style to sticky top. So again, I'm utilizing style inline here, and on the page here, but obviously this would need to go into the main CSS page or your main CSS page. This is just for you to see what's happening. And so we've applied sticky top to the nav bar, so that should now stick to the top. And nope, that's not working. So the reason why that's not working, because I'm going to put it in the class. It's a Bootstrap class. So I'll refresh again. There we go. So we now have a main page that scrolls if needed, and we have an independent sidebar. Notice I actually have to click on the different things. Sometimes in different browsers it will allow you just to hover the mouse over and scroll. Sometimes you actually have to physically click to get it to scroll properly. Okay, so I think we've pretty much achieved everything we set out. Of course, we can now think about how this is going to fold, when this is going to disappear, or if it is going to disappear, or when this column is going to disappear at what screen resolution. Of course, that can be controlled like was shown in the previous video in this series. But let's just have a look at a simple closure of this column at a certain resolution. So let's bring this, let's go into the tool here. So F12, responsive. So we're just got to find a good place. So I'm just going to go over to my HD view. So this simulates the 1920 by 1080 view. So it's just a case now of finding a good place or a good time to break this. So the screen looks okay going down to there. You can see that this column is slowly getting smaller and smaller. So it's just a case of when you feel that's going to be good to break. So maybe medium, for example. It might be, yeah. Okay, so let's just do this as a demonstration. So let's go back into the code, and what we want to do is just remove, so we basically want this column here, the small column, and we want to remove it when it gets to the medium size. So in the class, on our right column, we're going to use d_none. So from the smallest size to d dash, to, for example, medium, so md block. So it's going to be shown then. So if I go back into my code and refresh the page, it should disappear. Now, obviously what I need to do now is make this full screen. So I need to make this use the full 12 columns at this view. So I need to go back and find my column. There we go. So 9, the default is 9. So the default is going to be 12. And then at col MD, it's going to be 9. So it's now utilizing the 12 columns. And then when it gets up to this resolution, start utilizing 9 columns. And there we go. So I just thought we would quickly change this because maybe we don't want to get rid of this at all. Maybe we want it just to fold underneath. So at the moment we've got it so that it disappears at a certain resolution. So why don't we just change it so that at the medium view it goes into 12. Okay, so let's try that. Let's change that. There we go. You can see that this is incorrect. I've done this incorrectly. It's the wrong way around. So obviously from medium, I want it to be 3, else it's 12 at the smallest size. So there we go. So it's all working fine. And then it gets to the break point. And there we go. It folds underneath. So maybe that's a better view. Now, of course, you might not want that. You might want this to show smaller versions. So how can we get that to show smaller cards? So this is where we need to add a new div for a row. So here is the right hand side content. So I'm going to add a new div, class equals row. So what we're going to do is we're going to manipulate what happens in the row. So I just need to find the last card. That's the last card. And then I need to add the end div for the row. Okay. There we go. So basically within this row now, and let's just make sure that's still working okay. Yep. So everything's still okay. So what I want is, instead of it when it folds for these to go full screen, I want to have little miniature versions of this for a little time before it gets to the smaller size. I think that would be a better way of working. So with rows, we can specify, for example, how many items to show in the row. So row cols 1. So we're just going to show 1 item in the row. So that's what we have, just 1. But if I were to change that to 2, that should now put 2 in a row, and so on. So what I need to do now is just control when it's 2 and when it's 1. So if I keep the default at 2 up until I get to row cols MD, I'm going to make it 1. So now it should go back to 1 until it gets to the break point again, and then it turns into 2. You might want to have 3, for example. There we go. So that could be a much better view potentially for you. And obviously it gets smaller and smaller. At some point you need to make a decision when it needs to get to just 1. So what we can do here is, if I just copy and paste that, so the default is going to be 1. So when it's at the mobile view, it's just 1. And then when it gets to the small, so we can say cols SM, it's going to be 3. And then when it gets up to MD, medium size, it's just going to be 1. So when it gets up to this right-hand side again, it's just going to be 1. So we start with 1. We fall down to the breakpoint, we get 3. And then slowly we get into the mobile view, the smaller breakpoint, and then it goes into 1. So there we go. We've got a nice responsive video page.